Hey there and welcome. If you're hoping to bring an adoptive child home to Australia, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down the Subclass 102 adoption visa, taking all that official government info and making it simple and clear for you and your family. Look, we know this is so much more than just a visa application, right? This is about completing your family. It's about starting a brand new life together in Australia. It's a huge deal, and our goal here is to give you the clarity you need to just feel confident moving forward. And let's be honest, the whole process can feel a bit overwhelming. There are so many legal bits and pieces and specific criteria you have to meet. But don't you worry, we're going to walk through everything step by step to make sure it all makes sense. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so the very first thing you've got to get your head around is that not all adoptions are looked at in the same way, especially when it comes to visas. The specific path you take to adopt your child actually decides which rules you need to follow. So let's break down these three main routes. First, you've got adoptions done through an Australian state or territory authority. That's a pretty common one. Then there's the Hague Convention, which is this big international agreement that puts safeguards in place for adoptions between countries. And the third one is what's called an expatriate adoption. This one's really specific. It's for when at least one of the adoptive parents has lived outside Australia for more than a year just before they apply. Now here's a really quick but super important tip. If your adoption is happening under the Hague Convention, you'll want to check something first. Your child might actually be able to get Australian citizenship directly. And if that's the case, you can get them a passport and you won't even need this visa at all. So definitely look into that before you go any further. So let's take a closer look at that expatriate pathway because the rules here are really strict. Not only do you have to have lived overseas for over a year, but you have to prove it wasn't just a way to sidestep Australia's own adoption laws. You also need to have full permanent parental rights. That means all legal ties to the birth parents are cut, and the whole adoption has to be done completely by the book, following the laws in the child's home country. And this really says it all. This is a direct quote from the Department of Home Affairs. When the government itself is telling you, hey, you should really get legal advice, you know it's serious. It just highlights how tricky and complex this particular path can be. Okay, so we've talked about the different adoption pathways. Now let's switch gears and focus on the child. There are a few key things the child absolutely must meet to be eligible for the visa. Think of this as your main checklist. So when it comes to the child's eligibility, you're really looking at three main things. First up is age, and as you'll see in a second, the timing on this is super important. Second is health, which is a pretty standard part of most visa applications. And third is character, which only comes into play if the child is 16 or older. Let's really hammer this age requirement home because the number 18 is everything. The child has to be under 18 at 3 separate times. First, when the adoption is legally finalized. Second, when you actually lodge the visa application. And third, when the department makes its final decision. If the timing is off on any one of those, the whole application could be at risk. It's that critical. Next up, health. The child and any other kids included in the application will have to do a health exam. Now, if there are some significant health concerns, here's something important to know. For this particular visa, it's possible for a health waiver to be considered. That means there's a process in place for more complex cases, which can be a real relief. All right, let's pivot and talk about you, your role as the adoptive parent, the sponsor. The government takes this part of the process incredibly seriously because at the end of the day, their number one job is to make sure the child will be safe and well cared for. And this slide really lays out those protections in black and white. If you or your partner have a pending charge for what they call a registrable offense, we're talking about serious crimes, especially anything involving a child, the visa will be automatically refused. No questions asked. If there's a past conviction, it's a potential refusal, and it can only be approved in very, very limited situations. This is one area where there's just no wiggle room. We are almost at the finish line. Before we wrap things up, there are just a couple of final checks, but they're just as important that you need to know about before you get your application ready. Okay, 2 last things. First, make sure you've got no outstanding debts with the Australian government. If you or your family owe any money, it has to be paid back, or at least have a formal repayment plan set up. And last, but really this is the most important thing of all, the entire visa decision comes down to one question. Is granting this visa in the absolute best interests of the child? That's the test everything has to pass. So now that we've gone through the different pathways, the child's requirements, and your obligations as a sponsor, the big question is, are you ready for the next step? Really understanding all this is the foundation you need to build a strong, careful, and complete application. Because at the end of the day, this whole thing is about so much more than just ticking boxes on a form. It's about building your family. It's about starting an incredible new chapter. Every single detail matters. So taking your time and making sure every step is done with care, that's the absolute best way to make this journey a smooth one.